Okay, it's 11 o'clock. It looks like people will start to trickle in here. Why don't we begin? I want to thank everyone for joining us for our second forward-thinking virtual information session of the year. Very excited for the topics that we have lined up this year. Very excited for our speaker today. If you haven't already, feel free to introduce yourself into the chat. And throughout today's presentation, if you have any questions, you can put your question into the chat and I will read it, or our speaker will read it when we get time. I will be monitoring and asking the questions as we go along. If you are unfamiliar with Forward Services, if this is your first time attending one of these lunch and learns that we call them, virtual information sessions, just as a quick brief on what FSC is, we are dedicated to helping individuals find and sustain high-wage employment through supportive services and goal planning so that we can help them envision and reach their dreams. We do that by meeting everybody exactly where they are, listening to their needs, and helping them to address all the situations that might be standing in their way. We have many programs that help with that. The goal of these information sessions are to dig a little bit deeper into the topics that might be affecting a large population of Wisconsin workers, and providing resources and information that might help you to help them get a little further along in their journeys. I am your host, Landon Solano. I'm a communications specialist at Forward Service Corporation. I've been doing these for a while now. If you are a return customer, you know me well. If not, welcome. My door is always open. If you have any questions about these lunch and learns, about the invites, about the newsletters, you can always reach me. My email address is here, and I'll be providing these slides to you following this session. Do not hesitate to reach out, ask me anything you need. Just a quick note, today's session is being recorded for those of our partners and our staff who have a wide interest in today's topic but are unable to attend. We will provide them a link of this video either tomorrow or Monday, as well as a PDF of this slide deck, and hopefully we can share the slide deck of our speaker today. I forgot to ask that in the email. I hope that's okay. And we will also provide you a list of our FSC offices around Wisconsin so that you can find the local staff that can help you and help your clients get along in their employment journey. So today we're talking about the earned income tax credit as we prepare for the tax season. Just a quick recap or recap, I guess you would call it, of what we're going to be covering today. What is the earned income tax credit, otherwise known as the EITC, who's eligible, how EITC can help with taxes owed, how to claim the EITC, and I'm sure much more than that. So have your questions ready. As I said, put them in the chat, and we'll cover them as we go along. Before we begin, I wanted to just do a quick poll here. I'm going to put this up for just a few seconds. How many of you people talk to the people you serve about taxes and tax time? Just a simple yes or no question. I'm kind of curious as we go through this. If it's something that enters your mind, if it's a once a year sort of thing, or if it's part of the financial education that we provide people throughout the year. Interesting. Okay, cool. And then I hope that I'm seeing about 67% no here, in some case by case, which makes sense. I'm hoping that today will enlighten us and provide us some resources that we can start to have those conversations on a more frequent basis. So here, I'm going to share the results real quick, if you can see that. Fantastic. With that, I want to introduce Oh, I had a little statistic here. So I hope I'm not stepping on your toes, Jonathan. But I found this kind of interesting that roughly 20% of the people that are eligible for the earned income tax credit don't claim it on their tax returns. I'm myself kind of curious what accounts for that. If it's just an awareness thing, maybe we can touch on that today. But I found that statistic to be kind of interesting. There's room to get information about the EITC out to other people. So without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker today, Jonathan Ferguson. He is a financial capability specialist at the UW in Madison Division of Extension. Jonathan, it's fantastic to have you here today. I know you have a presentation for us, and I will be sharing some additional materials in the chat, links that people can go to while you speak. Would you want to take over and further introduce yourself or begin your presentation?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the intro. I'm happy to be with you all today. I will go ahead and begin my presentation, I guess. So yeah, let's do that. So let's see if I can get this started. All right. So hopefully you all are able to see my screen there. Looks like the answer is yes. So yeah, today I'm here to talk with you all about tax filing and the earned income tax credit, which is, as has already been mentioned, something that not everybody who is eligible for it takes advantage of. So we're going to touch on that and a variety of other topics. So I'll just kind of move ahead in our presentation here. So unfortunately, my colleague Claire is not able to join us today. Claire is actually a huge part in how I got connected to Landon and FSC and to lead this session here today. So I'm sad that Claire can't be here, but she's great and she contributed to this effort quite a bit as well. So we both are at UW Extension. So before we get into some other things, I wanted to cover a little bit about the financial reality of Wisconsin. So I'm not going to go over all these statistics that are on the screen. I think you all can read those as you like. But I wanted to kind of lay that out because our department, our division, the financial security program at UW Extension exists to improve the situation that you see on the screen, at least in part, to do our part to do that. And so to increase financial literacy, which in turn, we know, just based off data, when people have information, they feel like knowledgeable about things and they tend to act on that knowledge and take advantage of the things that are available to them. And so that's one of our primary goals. And as you can see, we've got some ways to go in the state with our financial literacy and thus our financial capability of all people, particularly those who are most marginalized. So to that end, we do have educators throughout the state. So this is the most recent map that I have. It's not, I don't think it's 100% up to date, but it's pretty close. So various counties have a financial educator through UW Extension that folks within that county can contact for programming or for financial coaching on an individual basis. And so that's something I want to encourage. We also have a website that folks can go to as well. And at some point, I know that'll get dropped in the chat as well. So UW Extension has a lot going on. One of the things before I worked for UW Extension, I knew 4-H. That's what I knew about UW Extension. I didn't know about all the other things. So they have things related to if you want to be a master gardener and really get into that, you can. Great parenting education and almost everything in between. So financial education is a piece of it as well, just in case you weren't aware of that. So that's a little bit about me and UW Extension and a financial security program. And one of our efforts when we go out and provide education is to ensure that we're doing our best to reach as many people in the state as we can, but also a diverse group of people in the state too. So to that end, we ask folks to complete a voluntary survey, which you'll see if you go to that link, or use the QR code on your screen there. So I know Landon's going to drop that link in the chat. And so hopefully you'll have some time today to go ahead and do that. I'll actually pause here for about 30 seconds to give you the opportunity to do that. It's very quick, it's demographic information. So I'll pause here and give you the opportunity to do that so you're not missing any part of the information that I'm mentioning today.
While we pause and let people do that, one of the things that I usually take on my shoulders while doing this are asking the silly questions, get the ball rolling. So,
Yeah,
while we're just waiting for 2 seconds, I'm kind of curious about the availability of the financial security
yeah,
program. Yeah. Where it's offered in the different counties. Is that open to anyone in those counties, or is there special
yeah.
circumstances?
For sure. Yeah, yeah. It's open to anyone in the county that the educators located. Any of the online programming that we have, if you go to our online website, there's information you can get there that's open to anyone. So yeah,
Mhm.
we don't tend to turn anybody away,
Cool.
and which is great because we know that a lot of the financial services available
Yeah.
sometimes have particular requirements that people have to meet for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're accessible as much as we can. Yep.
Fantastic. So that seems like a good resource that our partners can use to send people to if they need additional financial education and security information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a
Cool.
great question.
Fantastic.
All right, so hopefully that was enough time for folks to at least get there and click a couple of links, and we thank you for that because it's helpful for us to know who we're reaching and where we can improve, and your help with that is a big deal for us, so we appreciate it. Okay, so I wanted to give you all a second to think about what thoughts or emotions arise when thinking about tax filing. And you don't need to share this in the chat. You can if you so choose. But this is really a reflection question to think about. Like when you think about taxes, what do you think about? Are there happy thoughts? Are there excited thoughts? Are there sad thoughts? Are you looking forward to this time? Every year? Do you like the process? Do you like the outcome? Like all of that stuff. What are your thoughts about it? So I just want you to center yourself in that because that's a lot what we're going to talk about today, which can contribute to why a lot of folks don't move forward and why some folks do move forward with their tax filing. So that's just like a warm up question for you that I wanted to get you thinking about because we all have, I think, different thoughts when it comes to tax filing. Okay, so um, so here's one of the things that I think everyone should know about tax filing. Taxes are complicated. Um, it is very hard to believe in some ways that our tax code is over. If it were in a book, if you could picture a book, it's 70,000 pages long. All right, so no one actually walks around with the tax code anywhere because, well, one, that is like the best workout I think anybody could ever get, walking around with a 70,000 page book. Um, but that just provides an indication to you just how complicated our tax code truly is. And so we find because of that complication, which has grown over time, it has not always been that way, but it certainly is now, is that because it's so complicated, we have a huge number of people who work in the tax industry to help people with their taxes. It's a gigantic field, and there are some estimates that show that as many as 1.2 million staff work in the tax prep field, which is a lot more just by a comparison point than we have law enforcement officers and firefighters combined in the country. Right. So it's a huge field of people who get educated about this 70,000 page book and all the nuances of it, and then monitor it throughout the year, um, and then try and help people with it. So, as an individual pursuing your own taxes, like your own tax filing, that can be stressful. And it's so stressful. I was not aware of this before last year that we actually have a phobia of taxes. It's called phorasophobia. That's actually a term that people have. And WebMD has a web page on tax related stress. It's a real thing. So when we think about why people don't complete their taxes, this can sometimes have something to do with it. And when we think about why people don't complete their taxes, um, and take advantage of all the opportunities available to them, the stress can make you just want to get it over with. Right. Even the commercials that you might see. I saw a commercial for the Super Bowl. I can't remember which company it was, but their slogan is like, taxes, let's get them over with. We can help you do that. Right. So that's the mindset that a lot of folks have with taxes and can contribute to why they don't pursue them. They're just not fun for a lot of people. They're stressful. People are worried about being audited or dealing with a government official in some way and marking something wrong. It can be very complicated. So that's a little bit why people don't. So why would we recommend doing this? Right. Absent, obviously, the issue that people might run into from a legal perspective if they don't complete their taxes. Obviously, that's an important thing. But absent that, there are other reasons to do it. So there's prevention or detection of identity theft, as some of you all may know. Scams are like, the more technology grows, the different ways that scams become available, right? And that people take advantage of that. And so you may file your taxes, and there are people that I've worked with who have done this, and somebody else has already filed that taxes under their tax ID. Right. And so if you and those folks often have waited very long or to file their taxes. And so someone has been filing on their behalf, obviously illegally. And that just causes a lot of issues. So you get to a little bit of identity theft. Later, if there are any kinds of government programs that result in funds being distributed to the public at large, if you filed your taxes, those things usually come to you much easier than if you hadn't. Obviously, you may get a tax refund, which is often a return of your tax withholdings that are held in your check every year. So that's a reason. Um, there's less fear and skepticism as a person files and learns. So the more you become experienced with something, the better you're going to be at it and the more confident you're going to be at it. And then sometimes if you haven't filed, believe it or not, you can still get credits, which we'll get into in a bit, even from previous tax years that can benefit your financial situation. So there are lots of reasons to do it, even though it can be really challenging to do so because of how complicated and stressful it can be. Okay, so today's goals, we touched on this a little bit earlier. We're certainly going to talk about the earned income tax credits, and we've already talked a little bit about why folks don't, but we're going to talk a little more about like the amount tax filers can get if they do file and get the EITC and other tax credits as opposed to if they don't. But before we can really dig into that, we do need to talk about the US tax system for individuals, not businesses. That gets even more complicated for a lot of folks. Because talking about the EITC out of context without understanding those basics, and I can't assume everybody loves taxes and has really looked at that 70,000 page book and knows everything about it. So we're going to go over some basics there, all with the goal of helping you support your clients by making taxes easier to understand and navigate. Not easy, because it's so complicated. I will never say that taxes are going to be easy for everyone, but they are things that can be made easier for people to understand and navigate. Taxes are. Okay, so there's a very basic definition of taxes. Taxes are required payments of money to the federal, state, and local governments. Governments use taxes to provide public goods and services for the benefit of the community as a whole. So the whole point of taxes, and there are lots of different kinds of taxes, which we'll get into in a minute, is basically it's the cost of our society. Right. And in order to have a society, and you know, the classic thing you always hear is like our bridges, our roads, our infrastructure. Those kinds of things. Every politician ever says they're going to fix our crumbling infrastructure. I think that's like a talking point that everyone has. In order to do that, they need money, and that money comes from taxes, right? So if we're going to have a society, we have to have taxes. That's where they come from. So I'm going to throw another question out there, and this you can drop in the chat. If you know how to annotate on the screen, you can do that. I'm not going to go through that. That's not something that everybody needs to do. But what different types of taxes are there? So feel free to drop in the chat. When you think of taxes, what are there? And maybe
Yeah, we got an income tax.
yep, absolutely. What else? What else do you pay? Do you get taxed on? How do you get taxed? Income for sure.
Property,
Property taxes. Yep. If you own a house, you're definitely
sales
going to
tax.
have some taxes. Sales tax for sure. And even if you're a renter, you pay property taxes. I know renters don't believe they do, but they don't directly. But you're paying
Mhm.
to a landlord who's paying property taxes. And trust me, that landlord is transferring that cost to you. So you are paying property taxes. It's just not called out very specifically. But yes, for sure. And sales tax when you buy things, for sure. Any others? You all are good.
That seems to be all we've seen in the chat so far.
Okay. Well, thanks for engaging in that. As you can see, we do have taxes on a fair amount of things. So you all got a lot of these. So we have property tax. All right. So that's paid on real estate. But think about all the other things you might pay property tax on. So if you have a car, a version of a tax is, making sure you get your license renewal, right? Your plates renewal every year. That's a tax, right? And that's a property tax that you're paying on an annual basis. And at least in the state of Wisconsin, it varies state to state. There's a sales tax, right? So if you go to the store and you buy something, you're going to pay a percentage of tax on that. And that varies state to state as well. But in Wisconsin, it's 5%, and most counties require an additional 0.5%. And then there's sometimes even more tax called an excise tax on various things. Often those are called like sin taxes, like that's the historic understanding of that. So if you buy cigarettes, people would say like, oh, cigarettes have a super high tax rate. Things that the government doesn't want to encourage people to do for a variety of reasons, sometimes have an excise tax. And then we also have payroll taxes, and these are a version of income tax, but everybody, if you have a W-2 employment, you're going to pay some what they call FICA tax. And these taxes are to support the Social Security program and Medicare program. So you don't get paid back in that in the form of a refund on your taxes every year. But the idea is when you reach an older age, you'll be able to utilize those public programs and earn services that you've paid for throughout your life through the FICA tax. And that'll come through your Social Security check, and then also through the Medicare program. So those are a few. Today, though, we're talking about income taxes. All right, so income taxes are going to be at the federal level and the state level. And when we think about the earned income tax credit and other things like that, you often have different versions of that. You have a federal version and you have a state version. And we're going to talk some about that as well. Federal income tax rates can go as high as 37%, and Wisconsin income tax rates are as high as 7.5-ish, a little bit more. And income tax rates usually increase the higher a person's income is. So, as an example, it's like a ladder, right? So, if you make, let's just throw out a random example, right? So, if you're in a 10% tax bracket, you pay that on, we'll just say like your first $10 earned. And then there's another tax bracket, it's 12%. So everything above that, you'll pay 12% on until you get to the 20% or 22% or whatever. And there are different numbers. But you don't pay, this is one of the things I always want to reiterate, which is surprising for people sometimes. If you're in the 37% tax bracket, you don't pay 37% on all the money you earn. you pay it on that higher level of money above the lower tax brackets. So you'll pay 10% up to a certain level, then 12% on that next level, and so on and so forth. It's not like if you make tons of money, which is why you would be in a 37% tax bracket, that all of your money is taxed at that level. That's just not how it works. It's more like a ladder. So I always get that question about like, I don't want to make more money because my taxes are going to go up. My income taxes are going to go up. From a tax perspective, there's no reason to not make more money because your income taxes are going to go up, because the money you're making now is not going to have a higher tax rate. It's only the new money that you're going to get that's going to be that way. Now, there are other reasons to consider elevated income, things like benefits cliffs. There are certain programs that you might have available through the government, and they have certain restrictions, and then you have to think about things that way, but not from a tax perspective necessarily. Okay, so to help with these high taxes, which a lot of people will say they have, there are things called tax deductions and tax credits. And that's what we'll talk about next. So a tax deduction is an amount often for a personal or business expense that reduces the amount of income subject to tax. As an example, we know lots of folks have student loans. I certainly had student loans after I graduated from college. When you graduate, you have student loans. If you pay some of your student loan money back, then you're going to be paying a significant amount in interest. The amount of money that you pay in interest is deducted from your tax bill, right? So you do not need to pay taxes on a certain amount that you pay in interest. So an example for that is Sarah, who works and lives in Wausau, Wisconsin, with two children. If she earned 39,000 in 2023 and she paid $1,000 of interest on her student loan debt, when she goes to pay her taxes, she's only gonna pay taxes on 38,000 of her income, right? Absent all the other things, right? So if you're a tax person, you're a nerd, and you're like, what about the standard deduction? What about the blah, blah, blah? We're not taking that into account for this example. All right, so it's just an example to explain how that basic idea works. Also, retirement savings. So if you're saving into a retirement account, an individual retirement account, or 401k or a pension, and you're doing that on a quote unquote pre-tax basis, then you're putting money into that account and it's not being taxed. So if you put $1,000 into that account, then and you were Sarah, you would still only pay taxes on $38,000 for that year. So that's the tax deduction. It lowers the amount of money that you pay taxes on. The tax credit, however, is a dollar for dollar reduction in tax, right? And so when you file your taxes, you'll get a tax bill, right? So in this example with Sarah, same restaurant worker who lives and works in Wausau. If she's eligible for a $1,000 tax credit, right, then her income tax will decrease by 1,000. So let's say her total tax bill for the year, including withholdings and all that, was originally $5,000, and she had $100 tax credit, then her $1,000 tax credit is going to decrease her bill to $4,000, right? So it actually takes your tax bill and takes money off what you owe. So because of that, tax deductions are good, tax credits are better. So tax credits are the best thing you can use to deduct, or to lower, to use a better word, to lower your tax bill, right? So a $1,000 tax deduction and a 35% tax bracket saves you $350, right? So whatever the tax deduction is, you can multiply that by your tax bracket, and that's going to give you how much you're saving in taxes, right? So if your tax deduction is 1,000, you multiply that times 0.35, 35%, you're going to get $350 in savings in taxes. And $1,000 tax credit in any tax bracket saves you $1,000. It doesn't matter because it saved that off your bill. So it's a much better deal for you. Both are good. Tax credits are better. So now that we've laid the groundwork for that, I know that was a lot of info. So hopefully your head's not spinning too much, because you love taxes, right? That's why you're here.
We do have a quick
Yeah.
question here, if
Yeah.
you don't mind. Would that mean that a potentially higher refund, or will it just reduce the amount owed? The credit.
Um, so it could be a higher refund. It depends. So when you get a tax credit, some tax credits can only lower your taxes to zero, but you can't actually get money back from it. Right. So those are not non-refundable tax credits. There are other tax credits, like the earned income tax credit, where you can actually, even if you don't owe taxes and you have this tax credit, you get a higher refund as well. So it's going to depend on the different tax credits that are available and if they are quote unquote non-refundable tax credits or refundable tax credits. That's another one of the things that's listed in that 70,000 page booklet that we talked about earlier.
So just as an example, if someone had owed $1,000 and had a non-refundable tax credit, it could lower it to zero, or let's say 950. It could
Yep.
lower it to zero, but it wouldn't give them an extra $50 in their return.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. But if they had a refundable tax credit and they had that 950, it would lower it to zero and then they'd give that $50 back. Yeah, so that's how that works. And all the tax credits are different that way. It'll be in this is one of the reasons why people work with tax professionals, either on a paid or volunteer basis, to kind of help them understand the nuances as it relates to that.
Yeah, it seems like a lot to sift through, but we
Yeah, and there's no
appreciate this.
consistency.
Yeah.
There's no consistency
Yeah.
with that. You might think like, well, why would this one be refundable and not that one? And in some ways, it's just how it is. Yeah, I wish there were better answers to that sometimes. Great question. Okay, so specifically the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, is focused on low to moderate income workers and families to help them get a tax break. And as I mentioned before, sometimes with tax credits, there's a federal version and there's a state version. Sometimes there's just a federal version. Sometimes there's just a state version, right? So it depends on the different tax credit that we're talking about. With the EITC, there's both. So there's a federal version of that and a state version of that. Okay, so let's move onward. Okay, so to get more into the EITC, what are the qualifications for the EITC? So with a lot of tax credits, there'll be an earned income limit. So the idea is that our tax system is progressive. So if you make a gazillion dollars, the idea is, well, you don't really need a tax credit for a lot of things, right? So, especially if the focus of the tax credit is for low and moderate income workers, like the EITC. So each year, there'll be a new amount for the limit. It's usually attached to a rise in inflation and various other things. So it won't be the same forever. So for this year, it's somewhere between, 63 and $64,000 that a person can earn and still be eligible for the earned income tax credit. It has a few other things that are important. Usually folks, I always think this is an interesting one. It does come up, but most folks who are at that income level usually are not, don't have tons of investment income. That's not usually an issue, but it can be for some folks. You do need a valid social security number by the due date of your 2023 return. So that's something to know. You need to be a U.S. citizen or resident alien. I'm not going to get into Form 2555 because you can't have foreign earned income. We won't get into those nuances. It's not worth it. Basically, there are limits there. And then if you are separated from your spouse and not filing a joint return, right? So you can file single, head of household, married filing jointly. It can be available for people who are married filing separately, but then that gets very particular. All right. So likely you won't get into that level of detail with your clients, I wouldn't think, when you're talking about their tax situation. But that's just, I think, an idea to know about. And then there are special rules for those groups at the bottom of the screen as well. Again, the idea is not that you are advising them and telling them that they should do this or that. The idea so you have an awareness so you can talk with them in very broad strokes about what the possibilities could be and what they may want to talk with their tax professional about, either paid or volunteer tax professional, right? So that's the idea. So those are the qualifications for the EITC. Now, to kind of break that down more, it's like, well, all right, how does that look generally? Um, that was the previous slide. This slide is going to be more about what does it look like for the specific situations that people are in, right? So the EITC is very influenced by children or others who are claimed by folks on their tax returns, right? So if you have more children, then the likelihood for you to be able to make more money and still qualify for the EITC, um, it's going to be higher than if you have like few or no children, right? Then you need to make a little bit less to qualify for the EITC. So this shows basically if you have no children and you're filing a single head of household or you're widowed, then your income cannot be above 17,640 for the year in order to qualify for the EITC. If you have three children, to go to the other example, the other extreme end, I guess, and you're married filing jointly, then you can have the highest number possible, which is that 63, whatever that is, 398, right? So it's going to vary depending on the person, whether or not they qualify. It's not just everyone who makes less than 63, 398 can qualify for the EITC. All right. So that's important to know. So to further drive it home, we're going to go back to Sarah. Remember Sarah? All right. So Sarah, she's still in Wausau and she still has her two children, age 7 and 11, and she still earned $39,000 in 2023. So the question will be, does Sarah qualify for the EITC? And again, you just run through the chart to check. Like, well, would she qualify? So Sarah has how many children? Two. So we just go down to that box. She's got two children. Move right on over. How is Sarah filing? Given the information that's been presented, I guess you wouldn't know 100%, but given the information that's been presented, she's probably filing as head of household, probably, right? So given that, Sarah can make up to $52,918 and still qualify for the earned income tax credit. So yes, Sarah indeed does qualify for the earned income tax credit. All right, so to kind of break that down even more, I wanted to show you all some tools. So I think I will do that. So I think I'll share a different um, part of my screen here. So I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll go into a different area. So just give me a second. I'm working off one screen, so I want to make sure I get you all the right info pulled up. All right, so here we go. All right, and I think Landon can actually drop some of this in the chat. All right, so the IRS does their best to make things as easy to navigate as possible for folks. So they do have an EITC assistant tool that you can actually use, that anybody can go to the IRS and use to determine if someone's eligible for the earned income tax credit. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing because it's detailed and it actually does take a long time in terms of a presentation. In terms of doing your taxes and trying to find out if you qualify for this, it's definitely well worth it. But for the time we have today, It's just a little bit too much. But I will go through a couple things just so you get an idea. So you select the year that you're looking for. They do ask you, they're asking you the qualifying questions. Were you a citizen or resident alien? Do you have a social security number? We're going to say yes. We're going to say no, we didn't have foreign earned income. We're going to say, will someone else claim you as a pendant or qual? Nope, no one else is claiming me. Um, there are age things that are important to hear. We're going to say between 25 and 64. And then you get here and you'll say, do you know your filing status? Yes. You pick which one that you're going to go for. Well, so we'll go with head of household. Are you married? Nope. We'll say no. The number of children. We're going to base this off Sarah's information. And then you get here, and then this is where sometimes people get, whoa, what's all this? Uh, like this is a lot of stuff. Things are starting to get a little crazy. I'm not sure if this is something that I can answer, and that is completely fine to have that reaction. My suggestion in that is if someone is in that situation, again, to take their time, do it at a time where they're not stressed about other things, where they can breathe a little bit and not be rushed through this process. Because even this screen, for someone who's like, I don't know anything about taxes, they kind of scare me, it provides a lot of stress. Even all these options can be stressful, right? So this screen is actually, while it's the most accurate, it may not be what I would say is the most encouraging for someone to go through. Instead, there's a different tool that I think helps people maybe be more encouraged about it and understand that they can qualify for this. So I'll show you that now. So I'm going to stop sharing that one and I'll pull up another one and we'll go through that one. All right. So this one is done by, think of it as a nonprofit. Here we go. Okay. So the thing I like about this tool, right, it explains it very briefly at the top. And then it gives you some more information, which things that we've kind of gone over. And then this is just far simpler, right? So you pick your, like, are you filing single with head of household or married, which most people are going to be one of those. Number of children, 2. We're going to base this off Sarah's information. Household earnings, what did we see? She was 39,000. Is that what I said? Okay. So based on that, you can get an idea. Does Sarah qualify? And yes, she does. And specifically, how much does Sarah qualify for? So while the other tool would have shown you something very similar, because it's an IRS tool, they want to be very particular. They give you all the specific information because it's the IRS, which is great, especially for those who are in a more complicated situations. But for someone who's just like, I just need to know, is this something that I can actually do? Possibly. This is a much easier tool to use. So I would recommend using this for that as opposed to the IRS tool, even though the IRS tool is the one that is definitely more official, more complete, more detailed, the whole thing. If the idea is just to get a quick little snapshot, is this possible? This is the tool to use, I think. Okay, so I'll pause there and see if there are any questions, Landon, that I can address, should address, or anything like that. Otherwise, I'll just move on with the rest of the presentation.
I'm not
Which
seeing
is
any
almost
questions
done.
yet, but we'll give a second for anyone to put one into the chat. I just want
Okay.
to reemphasize, I think that thank you for walking through all of this. It's something I think uh, we all have to go through it on our own. Every person does to some degree, but to bear in mind the experience that, a lot of the people we serve are facing crisis, and that, this can be an added stress at this time of year to them. So bearing in mind what that, could add to their plate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's enough to freak someone out.
Yeah.
It truly is. No doubt. Okay.
And I know people get stressed out with being asked a lot of questions, but if you're going through a person, a CPA, whatever it is, or you're doing something like TurboTax, all of those questions are to identify whether or not you're eligible for the earned income or other
Yeah.
credits. So it is, there's a reason behind it.
Yeah, there's a reason behind it. That's why, yeah, sometimes the biggest step in being able to work through your tax situation is just simply choosing the most optimal time to
Mhm,
do it. And it's one where you don't have a rush or a
mhm,
lot of other craziness going on. So in some ways you have to, in order to be able to maximize it, if even if you're doing TurboTax,
mhm,
those questions can be stressful too. You're just like, all right, this is the time where I have as little going on as possible and as little background noise and all that, that I can get through this and kind of relax and pause if I need to, step away from it, those kinds of things.
yeah.
For sure. Yep. All great points.
No questions have come in, so I think we
Okay.
can move
All
forward.
right. So we'll move on. All right. So we are on this slide. We'll continue going. Um, all right. So let's see here. All right, I need to get back to my presentation. There we go. All right, so, oh, I'm having some trouble here. Give me 1 second. I think I shared it the wrong way. That's what happened. All right, I'll get out of that. 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 I got too much stuff open on my computer.
Yeah,
That's
I
for
think we can
sure.
all empathize with that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Okay. Okay. So, all right, I'm gonna try and blow this up again, and then I'll just run through it, get back to where we were. All right, so a couple of things I wanted to point out. There are some free self-filing options. Some of you all may have heard about these. You'll get these slides, so you'll have these links. There's some slides for both, or some options for both federal and state. And then there are also some options that are not necessarily through the state necessarily, right? So you have AARP tax aid sites, and then also some Goodwill sites as well, where folks can go to receive some free of charge tax help. But the key is spending the time, right? You're going to be charged something, and the charge for a lot of folks is just like having the time to do this, right? And dedicating time to it, even though you're not necessarily paying money. There is also an app. Everyone loves apps now. We all do. The IRS to go app is actually one that some people may want. Um, Again, the IRS is not a tech company. So when you think about your other apps that you have on your phone, I wouldn't expect this to be nearly as good as that. But it does give you good information like checking your refund status and things like that. When are you actually going to get your refund? Those kinds of things. Being able to make payments, good app for that. Maybe not necessarily the greatest one in terms of intuitiveness and fanciness, but provides great information. So now, yeah, really, I just wanted to make time for some discussion around these topics here and maybe hear from you all. Feel free to put some things in chat. But as has been mentioned already, as many as 20% of people don't take advantage of the EITC and other tax credits that are available to them. We've talked about what may cause someone who qualifies to not pursue these tax credits who are available to them. I'm curious if you all have thoughts beyond what has been shared here today. And then, maybe most importantly, what are ways that you can help prevent your clients from not taking advantage of tax credits and deductions that are available to them? What are some thoughts you have around that? Um, so yeah, that's what we have. So feel
Well,
free to yeah, jump in and drop things in the chat or what have you. But yeah, go ahead, Landon.
yeah, well, while people are putting their questions and thoughts in the chat, I kind of just wanted to touch a little bit on that 20%, the very first point there, which I'm just a sigh of relief that I put the same statistic in my presentation. I wasn't completely off the mark on that, but I would imagine it's hard to quantify the reason for that. But in your position, like, what are some like anecdotal things or reasons you can think of that, 1/5 of the people aren't
Yeah.
doing it? That's a pretty big amount of people.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's yeah, it is tough because it's not like there have been surveys to these people to understand why they're not doing it.
Exactly.
Anecdotally, it's the folks saying, I don't qualify for that. I never qualify for things. It,
Yeah.
it's
Self-selective.
yeah, it's often that. Or just not having people in their corner that know, that are more familiar with the system
Hmm.
and understand that like these things are available to them. Like people who hire CPAs, right? They get all the tax advantages that they possibly can. It's the people who don't have the ability to hire that level of an I guess expertise, um and often are time strapped, who just like, let me just get this done. I just need to get this over with, and chances are I'm not going to qualify for anything anyway.
Right.
That's the anecdotal, like, I just
How
want to
much of
get
it,
this done.
how much of it, yeah, to that last point there, is it also like once they're in it, it's such a grueling process to some people that it's let's get this over with as quickly as possible. I don't need to check every single
Yeah.
tax situation there is.
Yeah,
Doesn't
absolutely. A lot of it's that. A lot of it is I'm doing my taxes, because sometimes people are like, oh, well, these are people who are not doing their taxes. Well, obviously there are people who don't, but the statistic is about people who do their taxes and
Mhm.
are not taking advantage of this. Right. So it's often either a lack of just understanding about what's going on here, which it's hard to fault people. Again, our tax code is 70,000 pages long, um, or just a desire to rush through and get it over with, which is actually, like I talked about, is encouraged in some ways. And like we have a Super Bowl commercial where it's like taxes, let's get them over with,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just that both the like your personal feelings and then also the macro level stuff
Mhm.
is pushing you to just get them done and not actually pay attention to all the details or just not know about the details. And so that's why it's helpful for folks like who are on this call
Mhm.
to know that this is an option, and to, even if it's just to slow someone down and say like, okay, you're doing your taxes, have you had the opportunity to look at all the opportunities available to you, like the earned income tax credit? If you haven't, taking a couple of seconds might actually be beneficial for you. Sometimes just even that is enough to change someone's situation.
And that's, all transparency out there, why we wanted to have this topic in February, to your point about finding the time to do it and maybe returning to it over a
Yep.
couple sessions, preparing people with the information early on so that they can take a, look at what is available to them and schedule out that time if, it's possible in their busy schedules. We do have a question that came into the chat here. Would a two-parent household qualify for EITC based on your example? So I think that's from Peter. If Sarah, in your example, was a two-parent household rather than a single mother of two or single.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. And I always say, well, let's go back and check, right?
Mhm.
So let's not speed up. Let's go back and look, right? So if Sarah was married filing jointly, so the question would be, well, one, is there an increase in income now that there are two people involved? Right? That's the first question that would have to be answered. If the answer is no, then absolutely, right? Because nothing else changes. When you're married filing jointly, your income level actually goes up. in terms of the limit of what you can make, right? So if you were to look at this chart, still two children, now filing married jointly, the income level max that you can have is actually closer to $60,000. So that would still be an opportunity um, for this for that situation, provided the income stayed the same at 39,000. Oftentimes, if an additional person is involved, the income is not exactly the same.
And that's again, I'm here to ask the obvious questions, but joint filing jointly would be the combination of both incomes together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, both incomes together, absolutely. Now, the other option is, and there are various reasons why people do this, and sometimes it makes a lot of sense, married filing separately. So you're married, but you're kind of both doing your own thing from a tax perspective.
Mhm.
That complicates the EITC. That's when you need to go, remember that IRS tool that had all the details and was longer and all of that? That's when you got to go through that. Because that's when you're really going to get the true answer about your specific situation. So if it's any complexities at all beyond what you can see on this chart here, the best tool by far to get am I qualified and how much is that IRS tool. If it's pretty straightforward, that other tool is very helpful to get people to know what they're gonna qualify for.
And we'll I send out the resources and links to everything in these follow-up emails. So I'll make sure that in addition to your slides and a copy of this session, there will be clickable links that you can go and share with the people you serve, as well as educate yourselves to whatever degree you'd like to.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. I appreciate that. Any others or any thoughts about what you might be able to do as a, as a supporting professional to help any of your clients through this, even if you don't normally talk with them about taxes? You don't need to be a tax pro. In a lot of ways, you shouldn't try to be. Again, 70,000 pages,
Yeah.
right? And so that's why there are people who are trained in this. Um, but it's more of an awareness piece, I would say, to try and get people to slow down. But
I'll ask a question for everyone on here, which is according to that last point you have there, are there like education or awareness flyers for the EITC, something just to kind of
yeah, that's a good question.
just a resource that they can share with their staff?
Yeah, the best things that you can find for that are promotable
Mhm.
are going to be things that are on the IRS website.
Okay.
Um, the gift of that is that it's going to be incredibly accurate
Yeah.
and correct. The downside of that is that it's not. The IRS is good at a lot of things. Presenting things succinctly and in a very easy to understand way is not one of the
Yeah.
things that I would say the IRS has mastered yet. So if you want more information like that, you can check out our website, finances.extension.wits.edu. We have some tax information there that I think presents a little easier. Sometimes you can't make taxes simple, right? There's only so much simplicity you can provide for something that's so complex, but you can do the best you can do. And I think there are some pieces of information there that could help. We have a topic saving on taxes on the website, and that has, if you click through there, I think that can help.
Cool. Well, I want to be cognizant of time. We have one more question here, and then I'll think we'll cut it off. But if you have additional, you can always reach out to me, or I hope Jonathan will be open to some questions
Yep, for sure.
following the session. But we have a question here from Giselle asking, "What is the best self-filing site?" I realize that might be a difficult question to maybe answer, but
Yeah,
yeah,
there isn't one in particular.
yeah,
It's going to depend on the person's situation, their background, their level of knowledge. I generally answer that question with the one that they're going to feel most comfortable
yeah,
doing. And the only way to know that, you can look at reviews. We can't say one over the other. There are some that are much more popular. There are even options now. And I'm not saying this as a promoting tool. I'm saying it as a awareness tool. There are things like Cash App where people can complete their taxes through that. And I know lots of folks who use Cash App for a variety of services. So sometimes even if the tool isn't ideal, if it's the thing that the person finds most accessible, it is the best tool, even though it's actually not objectively speaking the best tool, because then they'll actually do it. So yeah, I would kind of think about the client, maybe what would come most easiest to them, and then just kind of base it off that. But I wouldn't say there's necessarily one that's better than the other, um,
I think that's a
objectively. Yeah.
great answer to that. Yeah. Thank you for your questions. I think it's time to wrap up. I know you have one or two more slides here, so
Oh yeah, definitely for sure. So we talked about this a little bit, and then if you all could complete a short evaluation, that would be great. So I know Landon, you can send this out,
Mhm.
put it in the chat. But if folks don't have time to do it, hopefully you can send it out and follow up
Absolutely.
information as well, because we just want to get as much information as possible from you all about how we can improve and get more information out and what worked about this session, maybe what didn't, that kind of stuff. So um, please do. It would be greatly appreciated.
Fantastic. I'm gonna switch over to my slide deck just to wrap this up. We did our questions and answers, so thank you everyone for engaging with us today. We hope that you got some good information. I won't put this in the chat, but you can scan this, or I'll provide this in a follow-up email. We also just want to know how we're doing with these forward-thinking sessions. If you have ideas for topics, you can certainly provide us some feedback. We definitely appreciate it. So you can just go to fsc-corp.org/forward thinking feedback. And of course, follow us on social media. On our YouTube specifically, you can find this session as of next week and all of our previous sessions. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was very, very informative, Jonathan. Really appreciate you being here and providing us such great information. Next month, we will see you for a topic that we will be announcing next week, I believe. So look out for that. And thank you everyone for joining. Have yourself a great afternoon.